Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are staring into the abyss, but, and I promise this is a good thing, we brought a flashlight.
That's a good way to put it.
We're looking at a stack of documents that, frankly, feels a little bit like we broke into a secure facility to get them. We're talking about high-level monographs, cabinet notes, training manuals for civil services and military leadership, and legal doctrines based on the Constitution.
It is a heavy stack today, a very heavy stack.
And the topic. It is nothing less than the new battlefield of the 21st century.
It really is, and you're right about the battlefield analogy. Usually when we talk about warfare or national security, we picture tanks crossing a border or maybe cyber attacks taking down a power grid.
Right, something physical, something you can see.
Exactly. But we aren't talking about land, sea, or air this time. We are talking about the territory between your ears.
The human mind.
Precisely, the human mind. And I want to be clear right off the top because I know how this can sound. This isn't science fiction.
No tinfoil hats required.
No. We aren't talking about mind-controlled chips or, telepathy. We are talking about a fundamental shift in how power is exercised in the modern world. The sources we have today argue that power isn't just about direct compulsion anymore.
It's not just about forcing you to do something at gunpoint.
Right. It's about influence over perception, belief, and trust. It's about what these documents call the cognitive layer.
Which sounds terrifying, honestly. I mean, it sounds like we're all just pawns on a chessboard we can't even see.
It can feel that way. But what stood out to me in these documents is that they argue this is actually the decisive layer.
What do you mean by decisive?
Well, you can win the kinetic war, you can bomb the targets, you can take the territory. But if you lose the narrative, if you lose the cognitive war, you've lost the entire conflict.
So all the other stuff, the physical stuff, is downstream from what people believe.
That's the key insight, yes. Cognition is the lens through which everything else is filtered. But what makes this specific stack of documents so fascinating, and why I'm actually excited to dig into it, is that it doesn't just admire the problem.
It doesn't just throw its hands up and say, this is scary.
No, not at all. It doesn't just say, oh no, psychological warfare is scary, doom and gloom. It actually tries to build a solution. It asks, what is, I think, the hardest question a democracy can face?
Which is?
How does a free state defend itself in this cognitive battle space without becoming the very thing it's fighting against?
Right. That's the paradox, isn't it? How do we protect the mind without controlling it? Because if you fight fire with fire in this domain, if the government starts using, brainwashing to fight brainwashing...
You might save the state, but you burn down the democracy.
You've lost the thing you were trying to protect in the first place.
Exactly. That is the risk, what the sources call strategic self-harm.
It's a great phrase. If a democracy uses authoritarian tools to fight authoritarianism, it destroys its own immune system. And what's its immune system?
Trust. The moment you start manipulating your own people to protect them, you have already lost. The entire system runs on voluntary compliance, on trust.
So let's lay out exactly what we have here. You called it a solution. It's a governance-first solution.
That's the framework.
We've got this comprehensive monograph. The title is Cognitive Battlespace versus Cognitive Warfare. We have these legal arguments that dive deep into the Indian Constitution, specifically Articles 19 and 21, which we will definitely get to because that is a fascinating legal twist.
It really is.
And we have these really practical rules of engagement matrices. These are designed for the IAS, the IPSO, civil service and police leadership, and the military.
It's a blueprint. That's really the best way to describe it. It's not a tech manual on how to hack an election. It's a leadership manual on how to stop someone else from hacking yours without turning into a police state.
So it's a book of rules for fighting in the shadow without becoming a monster yourself.
You could say that. It's about restraint. And it makes the argument that restraint is actually a strategic asset, not a weakness.
Okay, let's unpack this. The first thing we need to do is get our vocabulary straight, because the title of the main source is Cognitive Battlespace versus Cognitive Warfare.
Yes.
Now, to a layperson, to me those sound like synonyms. Warfare, battlespace, it all sounds like fighting.
Yeah.
But the authors here seem to think distinguishing them is a matter of life and death for a democracy.
It is the most critical distinction in the entire doctrine. I can't stress that enough. If you get this wrong, you get everything else wrong. And you're right, people use them interchangeably all the time, but the source argues that is incredibly dangerous.
Okay, so break it down for us. Let's start with the first term. What is the cognitive battle space?
Think of the battle space as the environment. The source uses a terrain analogy, which I found very helpful. Think of the ocean. The ocean is vast. It's neutral. It exists whether there's a war on or not. It has storms. It has calm waters. You know, commerce happens there. Piracy happens there. Tourism happens there. The ocean itself isn't the fight.
So the cognitive battle space is just our mental environment. It's the internet, the news, our family dinner conversations.
Yes, exactly. It's the neutral condition. It's the always-on environment where our beliefs, our identities, and our decisions are formed and contested.
So it includes everyone.
Everyone and everything. It's you, it's me, it's the media, it's the algorithms on your phone, it's the education system, it's art, it's culture. It exists in peace, and it exists in war. And crucially, the source says the cognitive battle space is not inherently hostile.
It just is.
It just is. It's where we live, mentally.
Okay, so that's the ocean, the water we all swim in. Then what is cognitive warfare?
Cognitive warfare is the torpedo in the water. It is the action. It is when that neutral environment is deliberately weaponized.
Right.
It marks a qualitative shift from, say, contestation, which is normal, right? We argue, we debate, we try to persuade each other in politics and advertising, to coercion.
So me tweeting my hot take on a movie isn't warfare.
No.
But a foreign government setting up 1,000 bots to amplify that tweet to start a riot is warfare.
Right. And here's why the distinction matters so much. If you treat the battle space, the environment itself, as warfare, then you start treating every dissenting voice, every critical journalist, every angry tweet as a combatant.
Start seeing threats everywhere.
You start securitizing daily life. If the ocean itself is the enemy, what do? You try to drain the ocean. You try to control everything.
And that's the slippery slope. If everything is war, then nothing is freedom. You can justify clamping down on absolutely everything because we're at war.
You got it. We must distinguish between the place and the attack. The ocean isn't the enemy, even if the enemy is hiding in the ocean. The goal of a democracy is to keep the ocean open for commerce and swimming and everything else while hunting the torpedoes.
Not to boil the sea.
Exactly. Not to drain the water.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've defined the terrain. Now let's talk about the weapon. How does cognitive warfare actually work? Because the source gets pretty technical here. It's not just propaganda, is it? It's not just dropping pamphlets from a plane like in World War II.
No, propaganda is old school, honestly. Propaganda is about persuasion. It's trying to convince you that my side is good and your side is bad. It's more surgical, more insidious.
How so?
The operational definition given in the source is this: the deliberate use of narratives and technology to degrade or control how a target observes, orients, decides, or acts.
Okay, that's the OD loop. I've heard of this.
The ODA loop.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a legendary concept from military strategy. It was developed by a fighter pilot, John Boyd, but here it's being applied directly to the mind. Observe, orient, decide, act.
Let's walk through that loop step by step because I think understanding the mechanics is really important to understanding the threat. Observe is pretty straightforward, right? It's just taking in data.
Right. You see a news headline, you watch a video on your phone, you hear a rumor from a friend. That's observation. In the digital age, we are observing thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of data points every single day.
We're fire-hosed with observations.
Constantly. But the real attack vector, according to these documents, isn't observation. It's the second stage. Orient.
And this is how we interpret the data we just observed.
Exactly. Orientation is your mental filter. It's your operating system. It includes your culture, your education, your past experiences, your biases, your values. It's how you make sense of the world. And the source notes that this is the most vulnerable stage of the loop.
Why is it the most vulnerable? More than, say, the data itself?
Because it's invisible to you. You think you are seeing the world as it is, objectively. But you are always seeing it through the lens of your orientation. It's happening subconsciously.
So I don't even know what's happened.
Not unless you're very self-aware. So if I can hack your orientation, if I can hijack your confirmation bias or trigger your tribal fear or exploit your sense of outrage, I don't need to force you to do anything. I don't need to hold a gun to your head.
You'll do it yourself.
You will decide and act exactly how I want you to, but you'll be absolutely convinced it was your own idea.
That is the scary part. It's the illusion of choice. The goal isn't to make me agree with you. The goal is to steal my agency.
The source uses a very specific phrase that, I have to admit, it chilled me a bit. It says the goal is to substitute consent with engineered compliance.
Engineered compliance. Wow.
In a democracy, legitimacy comes from the consent of the governed. But if that consent is engineered, if it's the result of a hacked ODA loop, then the democracy is hollowed out from the inside. You're still voting, but you aren't choosing. Your choice has been pre-made for you.
And why is this happening now? I mean, propaganda and manipulation, they've been around since the Romans. Why is it an existential threat in 2026? What changed?
Two things, according to the source, two words: velocity and trust.
Okay, velocity makes sense. Everything is instant now.
Right. The source talks about information velocity. Digital ecosystems have collapsed the gap between an event and the response to that event.
There's no time to think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Decisions that used to take days, which allowed for fact-checking, deliberation, just cooling off, now have to happen in minutes or seconds.
Which creates a pressure cooker for our brains.
It creates a vulnerability. The human brain has two systems of thinking. System one is fast and intuitive. System two is slow and logical. When you force a brain to make a decision in seconds, it can't use that slow logical system. It has to rely on heuristics.
Shortcuts.
Mental shortcuts. Biases, fear, tribalism, outrage. Cognitive warfare attacks are designed specifically to exploit those shortcuts. They don't appeal to your reason. They are designed to bypass your reason entirely and hit your emotional triggers.
They want you angry, not thoughtful.
Angry, scared, tribal, not thoughtful.
And then the second word was trust.
Trust. This was another fascinating reframing for me. Trust is described here as a national security asset.
Like an aircraft carrier or a satellite?
In a sense, yes. That's a powerful way to think about it. We usually think of trust as a nice social thing or something that helps the economy, but here it's viewed as hard power. If citizens don't trust their institutions, the courts, the media, the electoral process, science, the state can't function without resorting to force.
So cognitive warfare targets that trust to basically erode the legitimacy of the institutions.
It's like an autoimmune disease.
That's a great analogy.
If you could make people believe the election is rigged, or the vaccine is poison, or the police are the enemy, you don't need to actually rig the election or poison the vaccine. The chaos is the same. You paralyze the state from within.
Okay, so we have this environment, the battlespace, and we have this weapon cognitive warfare that hacks our OODA loop. But here is the million-dollar question, the one that makes this so devilishly difficult for policymakers. Where's the line?
Yes.
Because politicians try to influence us. Advertisers try to influence us. My mother-in-law tries to influence me. Is all of that warfare?
This is where the document gets really useful for people in government. It establishes a doctrinal red line. It says we can't just go by the word influence because influence is a normal part of human behavior. We need objective criteria to say, okay, that crossed the line from politics into warfare.
And they give us 4 specific criteria. If all 4 are met, it's not politics, it's war. Let's run through them.
Okay, so number 1 is intent. There must be an explicit aim to control decision-making.
Control, not just persuade.
Correct. Not just to inform, not just to persuade, but to control. It's the difference between a journalist writing a biased article, which is persuasion, and an intelligence agency planning a psyop to make a population surrender, which is control.
Okay, intent. But intent is hard to prove sometimes, isn't it? What's number 2?
It is, but it's a necessary starting point. Number 2 is adversarial targeting. The actor is selecting a specific population or institution as a target. It's not a broadcast to everyone, it's a targeted strike.
Like they're looking for a crack in society.
Exactly. They are looking for a fissure, say, a religious divide or an ethnic tension or an economic anxiety, and they're targeting that specific group to wedge it open and create chaos.
Okay, so we have intent and targeting. Number 3.
Number 3 is deception or opacity. This is a huge one. The operation relies on falsehoods, on masking the identity of the actor, or on hidden coordination.
So it's about being sneaky.
It's about being inauthentic. If I'm trying to persuade you openly and I sign my name to it, that's debate. Even if I'm wrong, it's still part of the public square. But if I'm pretending to be a grassroots movement of concerned citizens when I'm actually a bot farm in a basement in another country,
that's deception. That's warfare.
that's warfare. It's the masking of the source that is key.
And the 4th one.
Number 4 is autonomy violation. This goes right back to the O-Day loop we talked about. It's the deliberate exploitation of vulnerabilities, fear, cognitive load, trauma, bias, to bypass a person's reasoned consent.
It's treating you like a switch to be flipped, not a person to be persuaded.
Yes. It's not treating you as a thinking agent, but as a button to be pushed.
So if you have all 4 of those things, intent to control, specific targeting, deception, and autonomy violation, then you have crossed the line.
Precisely. According to this doctrine, if an actor is doing all 4 of those things, they aren't a participant in the democracy. They are an attacker of the democracy.
And this brings us to the legal foundation for the whole thing. The sources heavily, and I mean heavily, reference the Indian Constitution. And this is fascinating to me because usually when we talk about national security, the law is seen as a hurdle.
That's a constraint, yeah.
Right. Oh, we could catch the bad guys if only the law let us. But here, the law is positioned as the shield.
It's a fundamental reframing. It frames cognitive defense not just as a good policy choice, but as a constitutional obligation.
Okay, so they talk about two articles in particular, Article 19 and Article 21. For our listeners who aren't constitutional lawyers, Article 21 is the right to life and personal liberty. How on earth does that apply to my mind?
The argument here is, I think, novel and profound. The doctrine interprets personal liberty to include mental autonomy and decisional privacy.
Decisional privacy.
Yes. Think about physical privacy. The police can't just burst into your bedroom without a warrant, right? This doctrine argues that the state, or anyone else for that matter, cannot covertly burst into your mind without your consent.
So if the state is secretly manipulating my decisions using these covert techniques, they are violating my personal liberty.
They are violating your due process. The argument is that you have a fundamental right to your own thoughts, to your own decision-making process. If that process is being engineered by an external actor without your knowledge or consent, your liberty has been breached.
That's a huge shift in thinking. It means your mind has a right to privacy just like your home does.
In a sense, yes. And then you have Article 19, which is freedom of speech. Now, usually we think of that as the speaker's right. I have the right to say what I want.
My right to yell on the internet.
Your right to yell on the internet. But this doctrine frames it very cleverly as a listener's right.
A listener's right. I've never heard it put that way before.
It's a vital concept for this to work. It says that citizens have a right to a marketplace of ideas that hasn't been deliberately rigged.
So if the information environment is polluted, my rights are being violated.
Exactly. If the state is secretly pumping sewage into the water supply of information, if they're using bots to drown out dissent or using algorithms to hide the truth, they are violating your right to free speech because they are distorting the very environment in which you speak and listen.
So the bottom line here, legally, is that domestic cognitive warfare by the state isn't just bad policy or dirty politics. It's unconstitutional.
It is illegal. Full stop. And that provides the rock-solid legal basis for the whole solution they propose. It means the government cannot use these tools against its own people, even if they think it's for a good reason. The Constitution forbids it.
Which brings us to the solution, the playbook. Because it's one thing to have these high-minded ideals and legal theories, but what does a government official actually do when the crisis hits? When there's a riot brewing, when a deep fake is going viral?
That's where the rubber hits the road, as they say. And this is where it gets very practical. The sources include a Rules of Engagement Matrix and ROE, specifically for the cabinet and the security agencies. It uses a simple traffic light system: green, amber, red.
I love a good traffic light system. Simple, clear under pressure. Let's start with green. What is permissible? What can the government always do?
Green is all about transparency-based measures. These are actions the state can take any time in peace or crisis. Things like public advisories, media literacy campaigns, factual rebuttals to misinformation.
And something called pre-bunking.
Pre-bunking, yes.
Yeah.
Which is basically warning people about a lie or a manipulative narrative before it spreads widely. You're inoculating the population against it.
So it's basically fighting bad speech with more and better speech.
Exactly. The core rationale here is that these measures strengthen citizen agency. They add information to the system rather than restricting it. They respect your ability to think for yourself. If there's a rumor that a dam is broken, the government comes out and says, the dam is fine, here's a live video feed, and then trusts you to make the right decision.
Okay, that's the easy stuff. Now, amber. This is where it gets tricky.
Exceptional measures. Amber is for emergencies only. Think of a massive deepfake attack inciting immediate violence, or a panic during a pandemic where a false rumor is leading to deaths. Situations where the normal green measures are too slow.
So what can they do? Can they start shutting things down?
They can take limited, temporary action. For example, throttling the virality of a specific piece of content, or temporarily taking down a server that is coordinating a bot attack, or putting a temporary break on forwarding messages on an app during a riot.
But I'm guessing there's a massive but here.
A massive but, yes. The constraints are incredibly strict. Amber actions must be time-bound. They must be logged in real time, and they must be reviewable by an independent body after the fact. You can't just flip the amber switch and leave it on. It's an emergency brake, not a new steering wheel.
This brings up one of my favorite details in the whole stack of documents, the 10-minute log rule.
It is brilliant, isn't it? Just so simple and practical.
Explain it.
The rule states, and I'm paraphrasing here, if an action cannot be logged and justified in 10 minutes, it is too complex to be legitimate.
I love that. It just cuts through so much potential bureaucracy and, frankly, ass covering. If you can't write down why you're doing this and who authorized it in 10 minutes, you're probably doing something shady.
It acts as a check against what the document calls memory laundering.
Memory laundering.
You know, when the officials say later, oh, we didn't mean to do that, or I don't recall authorizing that, or it was a very complex situation, this rule says, no. If you're taking away people's rights, even for a minute, you need to be able to say why, clearly, right now. If it's logged in real time, you own that decision.
Okay, so that's Ambury, the emergency brake, and finally Rendi, the no-go zone. What's in there?
Renity is the list of absolute prohibitions. These are things the state can never do to its own citizens.
Like what?
Domestic cognitive manipulation, psychological profiling of citizens for political purposes, covertly seeding narratives in the media, using algorithms to shadow ban dissent, basically using the tools of cognitive warfare against your own people.
Even if it works. I mean, what if you could stop a riot by pushing a covert narrative? Isn't that a good outcome?
The doctrine says no, absolutely not, even if it works tactically in the short term. Because if the state uses these tools, it destroys its strategic legitimacy. It negates the whole concept of democratic consent.
So once you cross into RAD, you're no longer a democratic government.
You are no longer a democratic government protecting its people. You are an authoritarian government managing a population. The line is that stark.
That is a hard line to hold in a crisis. When people are screaming for law and order, the temptation to just reach for the RAD tools must be immense.
It is. Of course it is. Which is why the source material includes these wargaming scenarios. They want leaders to practice this stuff before the actual crisis hits. Because in the heat of the moment, your instincts will fail you. You need muscle memory for restraint.
All right, let's run through a couple of those scenarios. They're pretty illuminating. Scenario 1, the election deepfake.
Okay, let's set the scene. It's 48 hours before a major national election. Tensions are incredibly high. A video surfaces of a top leader, let's say the prime minister or the leading opposition candidate, taking a huge bribe or saying something incredibly hateful about a minority group.
And it looks real.
It looks perfect. It's an AI-generated deepfake, but it's high definition, the voice is perfect, and it's going viral. Millions of views in an hour.
So you have panic in the control room. The phones are ringing off the hook. The media is calling, do something, stop it. The temptation is to just nuke it, shut down the internet, arrest the people sharing it, the authoritarian reflex.
Right, but let's apply the matrix. First, what are the green actions?
Transparency.
Exactly. Public attribution. The government's technical bodies come out immediately and say, this is a fake, here is the forensic proof, here's the original video it was based on. You put the truth out there, loudly and clearly.
Then what?
Then, platform coordination. You work with the social media companies to label it as manipulated media. Again, this is a green action. You aren't necessarily removing it, you are adding context. You are flagging it for users.
Okay, let's say it's spreading too fast. The labels aren't enough, people are getting angry, there are reports of sporadic violence breaking out.
Then you might move to amber. Maybe a strictly time-bound 48-hour throttle on the sharing of that specific file hash.
So you're not doing a total internet blackout?
No, never. A total blackout harms the economy, stops people from getting legitimate news, and creates more panic. This is a surgical break on the velocity of that one piece of content. You slow it down so the truth can catch up.
And you have to log it, the 10-minute rule.
You have to log it. At 3:15 p.m., authorized by X, we requested platforms to throttle file Y due to imminent risk of violence in City Z. Action to be reviewed in 24 hours. And it has to end when the election is over or the threat passes.
And what would be a red action in this scenario?
Red D would be using the state apparatus to secretly push a counter-narrative.
Oh.
For example, making up a lie about the other side to distract people. Or using government-run bots to flood the zone with noise and confusion. Or arresting people for sharing the video who genuinely believe it's true.
Because that crosses the line into deception and coercion.
Precisely.
Okay. Scenario 2, protests with foreign bots. This one feels ripped from the headlines pretty much every week. You have a domestic protest, real people, with real grievances about a government policy.
The legitimate protest.
A legitimate protest. But your intelligence agencies show that foreign bots, let's say from an adversarial nation, are amplifying it. They are retweeting the most violent rhetoric. They are spreading rumors of police brutality, trying to make the protests bigger and nastier.
This is a classic gray zone trap. Because the temptation for the government is to say, look, foreign interference. This whole thing is an attack on the nation. Shut it down.
Right. You use the bots to delegitimize the entire movement. It's all a foreign plot.
Exactly. Yeah. But the doctrine here draws a crucial distinction, and it's so important. Foreign interference does not invalidate domestic dissent.
Say that again.
Foreign interference does not invalidate domestic dissent. Just because a Russian bot is retweeting me doesn't mean my grievance isn't real. If I'm angry about taxes and a bot from Beijing retweets me, I'm still angry about taxes.
So what's the move? How do you separate the signal of real dissent from the noise of foreign interference?
The move is pure green. Disclose the foreign activity. You hold a press conference and you tell the public, hey, just so you know, our analysis shows that 40% of the traffic on this protest hashtag is coming from server farms in country X. We want you to be aware of that.
You give the information to the citizens.
You give them the information and you trust them. You trust the protesters to know they are being used and to police their own movement. It's about information, not suppression.
And what's the R&D line here?
The R&D line is using that intelligence as a pretext to do something coercive. Using psychological profiling on the protest leaders to find dirt on them and blackmail them, or using the media to label the whole movement as anti-national just because of the bots. That creates a permanent enemy out of your own citizens. You end up pushing them into the arms of the adversary you were trying to fight.
The source also has a fast test for crisis rooms, a quick checklist for officials under pressure when they don't have time to look up the whole matrix.
Yeah, it boils down to 3 simple questions. Question 1. Is the state hiding its role? If the answer is yes, it's RED action.
Okay.
Question 2. Is a domestic political preference being shaped? In other words, are you doing this to help your party win or to make the opposition look bad? Yes, it's RED.
That's a big one.
It's huge. And question 3. Is the goal awareness or compliance? If you want people to know something, it's probably green. If you want them to obey something mentally, it's likely red.
It sounds good on paper. It all sounds very noble. But in the heat of the moment, when your capital is burning or your election is at risk, do we really think officials can stick to this? It takes an incredible amount of discipline.
That is the leadership problem. And the source is very, very clear about this. This isn't a tech problem you can solve with a better algorithm. It's a leadership problem. You can have the best AI in the world, but if your leader is insecure, paranoid, or power-hungry, they will use it to crush dissent.
And that's why they break down training modules for the different services, right? The IAS, the IPS, the military. They recognize that these groups have different DNAs, different institutional cultures.
Yes, because they all have different instincts, and you have to train against those instincts in this specific domain.
So let's take the IAS, the civil service, the bureaucracy. What's their focus in this training?
For the IAS, the focus is on platform governance and ensuring legality. Their job is to keep the receipts, to make sure every Amber action is logged, every decision is legal. Their role is to be bureaucratic, in the best sense of the word, procedural, accountable, by the book. They are the guardians of the process.
Okay. And the IPS, the police.
This is perhaps the hardest cultural shift. The police are trained to handle criminal disorder, riots, looting, physical violence.
Whoa.
But here they are being asked to handle narrative disorder.
Battle of ideas.
And the source explicitly says, dissent is not a police matter. The police must be trained to distinguish between a guy throwing a brick and a guy throwing a tweet. One is a crime, the other is speech.
That requires a massive change in the mindset of policing.
Huge. It requires them to de-escalate narrative conflict, not just suppress it with force. It's a whole new skill set.
And finally, the military.
For the military, there is the strictest, brightest red line of all. In the military, you are trained to fight foreign enemies. You use PSYOP's psychological operations to confuse, demoralize, and break the will of the enemy. The doctrine is crystal clear on this. Those techniques must never be imported into the domestic sphere.
You can't treat your own population as the enemy combatant.
Never. Because the moment the military turns its psychological weapons inward, democracy is effectively over. You have a military junta in all but name.
And to make sure everyone sticks to these rules, the governance architecture includes audit mechanisms. We talked about the 10-minute log, but there's also something called the risk register.
Yes. I thought this was so smart. They explicitly list the biggest risks to the doctrine itself, things like mission creep and faculty capture.
Absolutely captured.
It's the risk that these new powers and capabilities get used for things they weren't intended for. They know that these powers, once created, have a tendency to expand. If you let the state throttle the internet for a riot this year, next year they'll want to do it for a protest, and the year after that for a bad news cycle.
So how do we stop the creep?
Through the transparency checklist, there's a requirement for mandatory post-incident disclosure. If you use an amber power, if you throttle content, if you block a site, you must tell the public. Maybe not in the middle of the crisis, but within a set period, like 30 to 90 days, you have to show your work.
Silence is corrosive. That's the quote from the document that stuck with me.
It is. Because if you hide what you did, people will assume the absolute worst. Transparency forces you to be disciplined because you know you'll have to explain your actions later. It creates a future shadow over your current decisions.
Now, I want to zoom out a bit. We've talked a lot about what this doctrine says a democracy should do, but there are other models out there. We aren't the only ones dealing with this problem. The source spends some time comparing the democratic model to the authoritarian models, specifically Russia and China.
And this is fascinating because it's a know your enemy section, but it's also a know thyself section. It shows why we can't just copy their playbook. Sometimes you hear people say, oh, China controls their internet. Why can't we? It's so stable. They don't have these messy protests.
It seems efficient from the outside.
It is brutally efficient at control, but at a terrible, terrible cost. Let's look at the Russian model first. The source calls it reflexive control.
What does that mean, reflexive control?
It relies on chaos, on nihilism. The goal of Russian cognitive warfare isn't to make you believe a specific lie. It's to make you doubt everything.
To destroy the idea of truth itself.
To dissolve the very category of truth. If nothing is true, then power is all that matters. It's what they call the fire hose of falsehood. They just flood the zone with so many conflicting theories and conspiracies that you, the citizen, just give up and say, I guess we'll never know the truth.
It's weaponized confusion. It makes the population cynical and passive and easy to rule.
Exactly. Now contrast that with the Chinese model. The source calls it discourse discipline.
That sounds very strict, very orderly.
It is. It's about enforced coherence. It's preemptive suppression. They scrub the internet of anything that contradicts the party line before it can even spread. Their goal is to create a perfect, harmonious, and totally artificial public narrative. It's a walled garden where no weeds are allowed to grow.
So Russia is manufactured chaos and China is manufactured control. Why can't a democracy do either of those things?
Because of what the source calls democratic exceptionalism. And this isn't about arrogance like we're better than them. It's about the fundamental mechanics of how a democracy works. Democracies run on voluntary compliance.
We follow the law because we believe the system is basically fair.
Right. Not because there is a soldier in every corner. Our system runs on legitimacy.
And if a democracy tries to use the Russian model of chaos?
It destroys the shared reality we need to have a debate or an election. If we can't agree on basic facts, we can't govern ourselves.
And if it tries the Chinese model of control?
It destroys the freedom of speech and thought that gives the government its legitimacy in the first place.
So either way, it's strategic self-harm.
Precisely. If we use their tools, we kill the host. We destroy the very thing we are trying to protect, which is why the document argues that, for a democracy, restraint isn't weakness. It's not that we can't do what they do, it's that we must choose not to, because we are playing a different game. We are playing a long game based on stability and trust, not a short game of coercion.
It brings us right back to that core mission we started with, how to defend the mind without controlling it.
It's a paradox, but it's the necessary paradox of our time.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to synthesize all of this. We've gone through the mechanics of the threat, the OD loop. We've drawn the red lines, the 4 criteria. We've looked at the practical playbook green, amber, red. And we've looked at the governance, the training, and the audits. What is the one thing you want the listener to walk away with from all this?
I think it's the definition of victory. In a kinetic war, victory is clear. You take the hill, you destroy the enemy tank. In the cognitive battle space, victory looks very different.
What does it look like?
Victory isn't silencing the lie. Victory is resilience.
Resilience?
It's building a society that is resilient enough that when the lie comes, and it will always come, the system can process it, debate it, debunk it, and survive it without shattering. The goal isn't to control what people think. The goal is to protect the conditions under which they can think freely.
And that operational mantra from the document, it really stuck with me. If an action cannot be explained later to a court, parliament, and the public, it should not be taken now.
It's the ultimate litmus test, isn't it? If you're ashamed of it, or if you're afraid to show it to the public later, then it's probably cognitive warfare, not cognitive defense.
It's such a powerful idea. In an age where everything feels secret, where algorithms are black boxes and where influence is invisible, the source is arguing that the ultimate democratic weapon is the exact opposite.
True strength is transparency. Sunlight is still the best disinfectant.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a thought to mull over. We talked a lot today about the state's role, the government's responsibility. But if the battlefield is the mind, that means the battlefield is also you. The source talks about cognitive autonomy as a right that the state must protect. But rights almost always come with responsibilities. So if your mind is the territory being fought over, maybe the most revolutionary act you can commit is simply to pause, to take 10 minutes before you share that outrageous story, to ask yourself, why do I feel this so strongly? Is this designed to make me angry? To apply your own personal OODA loop to the information you consume.
Defending the mind starts at home.
Indeed. In an age where our minds are the battlefield, the bravest thing a government can do is nothing secret. And perhaps the bravest thing we can do is take the time to think for ourselves. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
See you next time.